All right, we get started. Greg, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
For your benefit, just chime in whenever you want.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think we need to do a privilege of the floor. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes from our last meeting?
Yep.
Were you up that late or early?
She usually is, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to really. review.
I move we approve.
Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
I abstained because I wasn't here. I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. And that Chris is here, do we want to talk about anything prior to talking about the solar ordinance?
Could we?
Well, Chris got to do the blue line stream.
Yeah, could we
So-
talk about the blue line streams first, since Chris
Yeah.
has to leave before 10?
Also,
That's
just
why I
I
opened it up.
have a quick question. Did the ordinance committee, the town board has not yet adopted the incentive zoning change or the scenic view shed overlay change. But I believe the ordinance committee recommended both of those on, correct?
We did.
Okay,
Yeah,
we just haven't.
I thought we adopted the
no.
overlay
I checked.
update.
I know
I've
the
checked.
SEO for sure.
Well, the first
The
one, but the
incentive.
update, I thought
We did the
update.
agricultural overlay, but we
You did
didn't
the
do the scenic view shed overlay. That was the change to the
Just a minor
underlying.
change, right?
Yes, that was, it says that the minimum lot size is 1 acre or the underlying zoning district.
Yeah, so, right. Yes.
Okay, all right, I'll take care of both
We
of
did the
those.
Original, we had adopted.
Yeah.
Also, we had approved through this group, the incentive zoning.
Yes,
It was supposed to be on the agenda in September, but it wasn't.
yeah, we did.
So.
We got to
put it
set the
on for
public
this-
hearing, yeah. Okay, sorry.
No worries. Chris, you want to talk?
I don't know.
Well, we wanted to, I know Chris has had issues in defining streams, i.e.
The 6 month thing.
Right, what our code says now is that if it's basically running for 6 months out of the year, then it's a stream, a blue line stream.
Can you
Yeah.
show me where that is in code? Because the definition of water course says a stream, gully, or other body of water identified either on the town of Canandaigua water course map, which is available in the town development office, or identified through site reconnaissance as part of the planning board review. Review would consist of a water course that contains a discernible channel, bed, and or banks, flows in a particular direction, and has a drainage area of 20 acres or greater downstream at the end of the parcel. So it includes the stream. And that was a change when we did the whole NRI.
The 220-9,
That's 117.
okay. I guess 220-9 has something that reads differently on the front of it.
So 220-9 is the applicable to all districts, right? But the NRI only pertains really to the conservation subdivision, right? That's the only section that actually has that. So 220-9A has preservation of natural features, yada, 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 has all that stuff. Because the town attorney called me too and said, you guys had a conversation, a planning board meeting about this.
Yeah, we did.
And he said that he did not agree with what was said in the planning board meeting, that he could not find that in the town code, that he thought that had been replaced.
We thought it'd been replaced too, I think, if we're talking about changing it from 6 month to class C or a classified stream. But it didn't happen.
It never got codified, is what we found.
But there is no definition, in 117, there's no definition of stream.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I think 220-9 reads something about the 6 months through the year. The shell, that's where the 100 feet comes from.
I just chime in here for a second. I remember when Eric Cooper was here.
Yes.
That we had some conversation
did.
about this.
Mhm, mhm.
And we talked about the difficulty identifying what was a stream and what wasn't a
Yes.
stream.
6 months. Yeah.
And I think we talked about recognizing streams being those that were recognized by DEC. DEC had some type of map that showed the streams.
Well, that goes back to the whole definition of water course. That did get updated in the code. So the section specifically that they're referring to is this 229A1, which references, except as otherwise stated in this chapter, no structure shall be built within 100 feet of a bed of a stream carrying water on an average 6 months of the year or within 25 feet of the elevation of Canandaigua Lake. But then when you flip over to 117 and you look at the definition of stream, it's under water course, which references all the maps. So I get where the wording is clunky, but I think it's also very clear. It's based on the maps.
Yeah, can we get rid of just the 6 months thing?
That would be the easy.
That's probably the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, John. To backtrack. This business of water running more than 6 months a year. Where I live,
There's a lot of gullies.
yeah, we have no question, and we got a lot of real streams. But when Jim Hecker paved our road, they put in all kinds of elaborate drainage things. And we have to the north of us, within 20 feet of our septic system, he has created a year-round drainage area that is wet year-round. That's, I'm sure the DEC doesn't know about it, and that's not a stream to me, but it's in the ass. But I would hate to see us create a disability because of what's a drainage ditch, which ultimately is wet year round, but it's not, it never, well, it is a torrent when we have a major rainstorm. Pardon?
A gully washer.
Well, it, fills up the pipe, but it's really the result of stormwater management.
I think maybe,
And would that create a disability for somebody?
no, not
Because there
necessarily,
gotta be
but
lots of those things that exist.
right, but so okay, so I see what you guys are saying about the 100 feet of the stream, right? But when you actually look at the definition of stream, which is under water course, it's already mapped. The code is very clear that the stream gully water identified either through the town of Canandaigua water course map or identified through site reconnaissance, right? So it doesn't, the 6 month thing doesn't pertain. Now, I know it's in 220-9, right? The ideal thing, easiest thing would just be if we said, except as otherwise stated in the chapter, no structure shall be built within 100 feet of water course. That way it
Take it
matches
out.
up, and then you don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah,
Because then-
yeah,
Otherwise, you
I know.
got all
It's
kinds
right.
of
Define site
drainage.
reconnaissance.
Going to look, I mean, that's just general, isn't, is there a
Site
general
visit.
thing and that's just a
That's- yeah, I
general,
mean-
that's,
We can tell a stream from a grid. It has a defined shape, stone at the bottom, sort of stuff like that. But we'd always err on the side of that
The map.
stream kind of thing.
and then the planning board always has, I mean, full
Discretion.
discretion.
Yeah. I just hate sending.
So
things
where's
to
the
us.
hardship?
If we kept it the same way it is right now, I think we could classify stuff like he's talking about as a stream, and then people couldn't build within that many feet of it and stuff. We want people to be able to build next to a drainage ditch that does have water 6 months a year and stuff like that.
Or if they wanted to, and they didn't get approval from the town, they could go to ZBA, right? Or the planning board.
Yeah.
So why do we need to address this?
Well, we need, our opinion is we need to take the 6 months out
Yeah,
because
that's-
it contradicts then the water course.
That's my point.
But they don't
Give more people
match.
freedom to build
Yeah.
and stuff.
Because there are so many, I'm sure what Hecker did is he captured some of the drainage tiles that were in the field that were uphill, and he's consolidated it and created a drainage path, but it's not a stream. Yes, it's a foot deep, maybe the little gully that it bore, but it's not a stream, and
We
it
want you
would
to-
create a
we
disability.
want you to be able to build a shed without having to go through the ZBA and everything like that.
Or having my septic system illegal.
Yeah. But then-
So to address this, concerns that I'm hearing, we only need to modify the language to eliminate streams that are running 6 months a year.
No,
Just-
that's not in there.
Don't call it a
Eliminating
stream.
6 months.
Yes,
Well,
basically.
Water course.
wait,
get rid of
wait,
6
you
months.
guys,
Refer to the
a
map.
couple of you, I feel like are saying different things. So the town code currently says on average 6 months of the year, within the water, right? You just need to reference you take out the 6 months and reference the definition of
Definition.
water course. Because then that's already defined,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's in 220-9.
So
Go ahead.
as a point of clarity,
Mhm.
tell me how you want to modify the language.
Well, I don't know, except as otherwise stated in this chapter. Because, and this is where I go back to, Chris was saying something different. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So it would say, except as otherwise stated in this chapter, no structure shall be built within 100 feet of a water course. Period.
Yes, that's it.
But that means no structure, no accessory structure, because you just said the
So
opposite.
no, I said, we want people to be able to build within 20 feet of his drainage ditch, where that definition, the old definition. There's water in this drainage ditch 6 months of the year, which is now a
Is it a
stream and you
stream?
can't build it.
So water course though, so people would not be permitted to build a structure within 100 feet of a water course. A water course is a stream, gully, or other body of water identified either on the Town of Canandaigua water course map, which is available in the Town Development Office, or identified through site reconnaissance as part of the planning board review. So
Yes.
how do you,
So
so
I would
if
say,
there's a gully there, you're not gonna be able to build a shed next to
I
it.
wouldn't consider it a stream. Or a water course.
Maybe
I would consider.
get rid of site reconnaissance.
Wait, how would you not classify that? Is it because it specifically says a gully? I said if there's a gully there,
Yeah, I don't know. Because I honestly, I'd like people to be able to build within 20 feet of a drainage ditch. Like all of
Can-
Liquid Meadows, Fox Ridge, they all
Let
have
Kevin in.
drainage ditches and swales and stuff like that.
How often does this come up?
We've been sending a lot. of them to the
Frequently.
ZBA lately.
Your particular application of driving this right now.
The one, no, that one does have water. in
Shepherd
it.
Burke, right, but that was, I mean, it's kind of been culminating, but there was an application that came in that where we went out and looked at it. The applicant said it wasn't a stream, it clearly is a stream. They said there wasn't water. 6 months.
150.
but wait, the drainage swale is not a gully. Because the definition of gully says a natural geologic formation
Okay.
that carries water during or immediately after storm events.
So then I
So it's
wouldn't
not
classify this
man-made.
drainage ditch as a water
Correct.
course. Okay.
Is that our water course map?
Yes.
Okay, so anything in blue on there would be considered a water course. And would have to be 100 feet from it.
Yes.
Blue or purple?
Yeah, I think you just want to take the subjective out of it, which is the 6 month flow. And make it objective that you go to that map
You got a map.
and you say, okay, it is a blue line stream or it's on our water course map. Therefore, you have to be 100 feet.
Well, if you do that, then I have to ask the question, is a site reconnaissance objective or subjective?
Well, this takes the site reconnaissance out of it.
That's what,
It does say or. It says or in the definition.
then I would, as I'm sitting here listening to this, it almost makes more sense to me to take out the site reconnaissance as well.
Because then I have something that's black and
And
white.
you have something that's black and white.
Because we ran into it up on Route 21,
So then water course. would have to be
where we had drainage ditch
Definition.
going by,
Yeah,
remember?
yep.
South of McJanic, or
I
no,
think-
north of
Yeah.
south of McJanic Park, there's a 3 acre lot that's for sale right now. And there's water running
And the
adjacent to it from uphill. Essentially, it's a drainage ditch.
And the applicant lost the month because we had to figure out whether it was a
Yeah.
6 month flowing stream.
So in summary, it sounds like we're all on the same page.
We want to simplify it.
We want to just take the subjectiveness out of it and simplify it. And I recommend that Doug, someone in your office modify the language and bring it for a simple review and approval at our next meeting. Is that timely enough?
Yeah, that's pretty simple.
Sounds like
I'll
a
just do
good
it.
executive decision.
All right, what else do we want to talk about while you're here, Chris?
Just really touching on something called 1203. 1203 is a state law that says every town has to adopt a certain bunch of standards as far as fire safety inspections, commercial inspections, code enforcement programs, certificates of occupancy, certificates of compliance. And I think the last time we updated ours was maybe 12, 15 years ago, because the state just releases them every 10, 15 years. And they try to stay with the times, like this new one allows people to submit electronic drawings with stamps and signatures instead of they need 4 paper copies and this and that. There's certain other rules. They added a parking garage section because like we keep having parking garages falling in. So there's an inspection program for those. Trying to think, there's additional definitions because yeah, we're running into new technologies and stuff like that. It's pretty much big boilerplate, New York State boilerplate stuff. Right now we have it under our building code. It's called construction code / uniform. And it just spells out the duties of code enforcement in the town and stuff. And pretty much they replace the entire chapter with just updated information.
So then what as an ordinance committee do we need to do?
I guess Doug,
Well, so Chris, I guess, so in the past, you guys have all tried to keep it fairly simple, right?
this is
That's
30 some odd pages.
Can't we just,
Can't we
the
just
code?
refer to that?
The
Is
update,
almost what I'm thinking, instead of installing 31 new chapters or pages of code in our code.
Oh, just by
The only
referral.
thing is, we have to still define the code enforcement section. So, I mean, we'll have to go through that, but then the rest of it, we could just refer to the state code.
No, it's not a state code. Though.
Well,
It's a model law that you have to adopt because the state, the 1203 is the law that says you have to adopt these certain program standards, and they give you a template that you modify and adopt as a local ordinance.
but it really relates back to the ICC code.
No, the only one definition does.
This whole example. Well, if we're installing 31 chapters, you guys are gonna need probably
31
months
pages,
of meetings to go through this. Cause this is,
It's a whole,
Exorbitant.
Yes.
it's a replacement for an entire chapter of our code.
but this gets everything, I mean, sugar house alternative. I mean,
That's
why,
a- That's a new definition.
I know, but why do we need that? Why
I
can't
don't
we?
know.
Well, again, I always go back to we're a home rule state and let the state take us on. So,
I couldn't agree more. Why do we even need to deal with this?
In other words, if it's on the statewide rule, why do we have to adopt it?
well,
Right.
because we're a home rule state, meaning, and we're one of the original 13 colonies, and believe it or not, that does come into it. It goes, no, it actually comes back into law that each individual municipality, if the state wants to sue us, they can sue us.
Or slap our hand? I agree.
They got better things to do.
Yeah.
It's this board's call. That's like, it's a new, it just allows us, like, right, our current code says you have to have so many paper copies of drawings and stuff and everything. This one says stuff about electronic formats and everything. So
So it sounds like there's merits to some of it.
Well,
it's just a big boilerplate section that we replace.
it would be better to look at our existing code and see what needs to be changed versus just replacing. our
Can we pick
existing
and
code.
choose? Is that?
It's up to you guys. I just brought it here because the state gave it to me.
I mean, it sounds to me like the state is saying here, this is what we recommend, this is what we want, is okay by us. If you do electronic drawings, but if we're functioning well as a community, let us function well as a community. I mean, if it becomes an issue, if somebody says, hey, I want to submit electronic drawings and we don't allow it, I'm sure we do allow
We
it.
do.
Right.
But I'm using, that's probably not a good example then, but, then the person can go back to this 1203 and say, hey, the state allows it, why don't you?
It's no, the state 12.
Dictates it. Why,
Says the minimum standards, yeah.
so I say leave well enough alone. That's why.
Who is ultimately aggrieved if we do nothing?
Honestly, it's just another boilerplate state document that says, right now, we have the one that was set out 12, 15 years ago. We adopted the entire chapter. They came out with a new one that has new definitions, sugar houses. There's a new section on parking garages because Yeah, parking garages weren't maintained, so now they have a section on parking garages that
How many
got
parking
collapsed and
garages
stuff.
we got?
And now there's an
You're gonna
inspection.
get some
program
uptown.
and stuff. I
Yeah.
don't think we have any parking garages right now.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
might.
if someone
Yeah.
were to build a parking garage in the town, then I would say you go to reference that state code
And adopt that
and
section.
adopt that section that says how we're gonna maintain the garage. But I don't think we ought to go and create work.
The other thing I would think about, it doesn't jeopardize your enforcement abilities.
I think it's all kind of the same
That
stuff.
somebody
I
can
mean,
go back
there's,
and say, the town never adopted the codes, so how
There's-
can you enforce?
there's a section on the network. I don't know if you could look under that, yep. Under development office on the M drive.
But there's so much in this, Chris, that
No,
this
I
is
under-
unadoptable the way that it's currently. I mean, there's stuff in here reference to fees and stuff. This does not at all jive with our current town
Yeah,
code.
New York State.
So
1203.
Either it's got to be put into some sort of format that we can review,
And then the
or
a notice of adoption is what the state sent me.
You just add a sentence somewhere that says where applicable, we'll refer to this in the future of changing everything. How much stays the same and how much changes? Any feeling or
They add tons of just boilerplate definitions and stuff like that.
so stuff that was in there currently that we have is in
It's
this
still
new
good
one
and
also.
stuff, but
they
the
just
only thing I don't
added-
like is. They had a section called place of assembly where we'd inspect a place of assembly, which the old definition was 100 people. So Ron was doing churches, the big places, Tom Walls is one that actually has over 100, but there's a few others. But the new one said over 50 people, so all the places that were places of assembly
What's that?
now is over 100 people,
Agree that-
or over 50 people.
Sorry.
So
Or other.
it might add a
appropriate-
line to his workflow.
right, but again, I go back to we're a home rule state. They can't
I'm
make
not
us,
arguing that, I'm just saying.
right? So we could leave it at the 100 and that's what we continue to
Generally
enforce.
speaking, they can't make this, but.
Well, if
we
they
get
want
into
to,
The solar thing here,
I'm
we're
good.
talking about tier 4, they're.
Well-
gonna Put one there, that's it.
well, I want to talk about that, but anyway, but I mean, that's a perfect example, right, of that 50 versus 100. If our code says 100, that's what we're going out and inspecting, right?
Yeah, places of assembly.
Mhm.
I say, I would like to wrap this up and just say in summary. If the town office has an issue that thinks we ought to recommend this or adopt it or do something with it, then I think you ought to review it. You ought to come back to us with a recommendation for consideration.
If there's like valid sections.
there's
If there's
certain
something you want
parts.
to, yes, if there's something that you think that we need to add or language that you think we ought to.
Something that's missing.
Mhm.
Right
Right.
now, are you experiencing some enforcement disability?
Oh, no, no, I mean, right now it says uniform code, that's still uniform code. There's places of assembly, there's certificates of occupancy, certificates, of all that stuff is in it. Building is unsafe, the fire department has to notify me in case of a fire, all that stuff's the same.
So you got
All the tools are there.
the tools, okay.
I don't think I'll have to enforce a sugar shack or others that Doug's talking about.
You might.
We'll find
It's
out.
agriculture.
We'll take it as it goes, exactly.
Pot fairs.
Hot
I'm not even
fairs.
showing up.
Anything else, Chris, you want to address before we start talking about solar ordinance?
I mean, short-term rentals, you guys are gonna go over that and however you see fit, and
Yeah,
then there's
I think that's going to be
a big,
a lengthy conversation.
then there's accessory dwelling units, I did start something. And I pushed it through. We got a thing in Bristol right now, it's a template and stuff like that, but if you guys wanted to look at that too, it's available on our website, not website, but
Damn, Jim.
I'm done.
on the M drive, and Sean has a copy of that, so. Just some sort of, again, boilerplate that you guys can look at if it works for you. Okay, cool. I have a
Thank
meeting
you,
at-
Chris.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yep. See you.
Hey,
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
John, before we get into that, Kevin Mulvaney joined us. I don't know if that was for the blue line streams that we already concluded that conversation.
Okay.
Too late,
Hello,
Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, how's it going? I wasn't sure, Doug, you had emailed a week ago about, you weren't sure if you needed me to be part of the discussion on the, if it was gonna happen or not, so I just wanted to check to.
Oh, gotcha. I did send a follow-up email, but maybe that's it. I think we postponed that, right?
We
The
did.
pervious pavers.
Yes.
We're gonna do that at a later date. So sorry about that, Kevin.
I don't think we have a date
Yeah.
yet, just in the
Yeah.
future.
Right, we're going to talk about prioritizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and having some general discussion.
You're welcome to join us for solar, but I know you're a busy guy, so.
Well, fair enough. Are you guys changing that 100-foot water course? I popped in when you guys were talking about that a bit.
No, we're not, we weren't talking about the actual setback. We were talking about some inconsistencies in our definitions.
Definition.
Yes,
With the 6-month caveat, so we're
yeah,
proposing.
get rid of that.
Yeah, that we're proposing to just ex-nay that's gone.
Okay,
That's the proposal.
all right. Well, I would just, and I don't want to, just jumping in on that, there is what we've seen over the years with the 100-foot setback is in numerous instances on the smaller streams and water courses, the 100-foot, especially on the smaller lots, is tough to comply with. So it really forces a lot of variance discussions. And we've also looked at a graduated setback of certain things within, say, 35 feet, and then going out to that 100-foot zone, being like a riparian corridor. And so there's definitely a lot of things to look at there. I know the Menteith point one, Shauna, that you and I are looking at. That's one that is a good example of a balancing act.
It is, absolutely.
All right,
Kevin.
you got it. Take care.
All
See you,
right.
Kim.
Okay, so let's talk about solar ordinance. I think that.
Doug's red
Doug's
line.
did the draft.
got a red line here.
Mm,
And
With a memo. It should be a memo, so. Oh, no.
I want to start with your memo, Doug, because I had a question about that.
Sure.
We talked about in the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, last sentence,
Mhm.
prohibits energy battery storage systems in excess of 1, I assume that's megawatt,
Yes. Mhm.
AC townwide.
Mhm.
Do we want any battery storage in the town? I'll just start with that and throw that out there.
I came up with the same question. Why are we prohibiting battery storage?
And I'm
That's all.
posing it the other way. I'm saying, why do we want any battery storage?
Why not? That's part of, the sun only shines sometimes 8 hours a day.
I don't mind personal use storage. But this, I think, is in line with, or this is in concert with having large solar farms.
Not necessarily.
For the megawatt. So it would prohibit it in excess of 1 megawatt, right?
So
So
That
if
would
it's
prohibit
smaller
the
than-
large.
Yeah. So it would prohibit the large, but
Yeah.
you could have some sort of smaller. I thought that was what we had talked about.
Wait a
actually.
minute.
Yeah, I know Adeline was,
She was
That
adamant.
says
against,
any.
and she was against. any.
She was over, as I understand it, she's the visual bothered her. So what?
No, I don't think that was just-
Our solar farms are not pretty, no matter how much you put a lipstick on
If
it.
there's anything decent looking, it's a battery storage device.
Yeah,
Panels themselves are not
No.
ugly as sin.
you're not gonna make solar pretty,
No.
whether it's got a battery array or not.
But the battery array can be arranged, when you have all these racks and racks of, you see the steel structure or the aluminum structure, whatever the metal is, that's holding them up. Batteries are arranged on the outside to shield something at least. So to me,
Yeah, what
I don't-
was the genesis of?
I think battery storage is on a big scale, it's becoming
It's
more and
the
more in
size.
vogue.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
And if you're not accessible to the grid, then you're into a battery storage system, and the battery storage system could be as big as the array
Yeah.
system. And I think
Okay.
that's what we're trying to avoid is a mega battery storage system. And
I think. if you're
allow
gonna
it
have
for smaller systems, but not for big systems. So a big system would have to go find a grid source and not have a mega battery system to store. I think that's what
When you say big, are we talking large scale?
we're talking. They look like overseas containers.
And I
Right.
know that, yeah, and the technology is,
More than we've ever seen.
Terry knows, he's an engineer. The storage is getting, first of all, they have vanadium solid state batteries that
Mhm.
are not, I mean, we were talking last meeting that I watched, we're talking about the flammability of lithium. They have solid state batteries that are being produced and used, and yeah, they look like boxcars, but that's, I think it's a given, if you're gonna have a large solar,
Well, I
you
think
might,
the other thing
you,
is,
you might or may.
between us girls, I think we're trying to limit the amount of solar.
Well, that was the other thing. Somebody
So
said
why-
at the last meeting, why don't we outlaw them entirely in the town, so we send them to South Bristol? I don't know.
Well, tier 4, we don't have any say over. Right?
So yeah, that's an easy one, I think, for us to talk about. So tier 4, right? So the reason I wrote that into the code is because to try to discourage, obviously, tier 4, which are these massive systems. But theoretically, the state would permit them. However, if a town board in the future was facing a situation where it was the state versus a tier 4, and our town code specifically said they're prohibited in all zoning districts of the town of Canandaigua, it would give some legal wiggle room for the attorney to file suit with the state. It at least gives you some grounding. If you say nothing, you're stuck with whatever the state gives you. If at least you're saying that you prohibit them, again, we're a home rule state, there's a legal basis that you can file suit against the state.
That's new information.
Well, it's essentially, it's what we had kind of talked about at the last meeting about the tier 4s being cited by the state.
Yeah.
And it's doing the same thing, but it's at least putting it in the code specifically
So
that
we could, as a town, prohibit the stage force.
so it would more than likely, it would end up being a legal battle.
It
If
would
someone
be-
wanted to place one here,
Yes.
but if someone wanted to place one here,
Mhm.
One what we talking about?
A
Tier
tier
4.
4.
Very
a
large.
tier 4
Okay,
solar farm.
Mhm.
They
25
couldn't take it
megawatts
to the
or-
planning board because the planning board,
It would be automatically denied, right? They could apply for a
they
variance.
could apply for a variance.
Right.
And then if the zoning board denied it,
Mhm.
then
They could go to court,
they could go to court.
right?
And at that point, we could enter a negotiation.
Yes.
So we shut the door, but we don't shut the door. It's not locked. The door could be open.
Well, and the other thing is they could just go directly to the state and the state could say, yeah, go ahead, you can, you're approved. You don't need anything from the town to go here.
And then
In
that-
which case the town could,
that's the
Go
way
ahead.
that's the way I understood. You
Yeah.
had no say on tier 4.
yeah, essentially it is.
Yeah.
But if you say nothing, you really have no say. If you put at least something in there, you've got more
Why would they even bother coming to the town?
more than likely they wouldn't, especially if they
There's
say
not-
there's going to be a
right.
battle here, right?
That's the whole design of the tier 4 is because everybody, it's popular to be anti-solar in my backyard, but in somebody else's, it's okay. So the state said tier 4, we've got the regulation or got the
Right.
control.
Where,
And
we
I
don't even
think
have
if
a
we-
max for that, for a tier 4.
Prohibited the tier 1, 2, and 3, the state is gonna step in and say, hey, you're,
Well, 1 or 2 are really just the home system. the
It's
roof
really
mounted or
3 that-
backyard or-
3 is what's gonna eat.
Yeah,
gobble
you
up.
see it
where
especially
this
with-
comes in,
Three
it's
is a
1
concern.
megawatt.
And what I really tried to do was taking Bob's research of the
Mhm.
tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then insert that into the code based on our last conversation on this about where we would like to see it or not. So basically like the tier 1 and 2s. And specifically, the other caveat here is, and just backing up for a quick second here, is really spelling out that this pertains to ground mounted, right? Because I think our current code just said large scale. and it didn't specify the words ground mounted. So I inserted the words ground mounted specifically because we have the unified solar permit for like the rooftops and all that stuff. That's not at all what we're talking about, obviously, here. So this is very specific to just the ground mounted, and then taking that tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 that Bob identified and really kind of placing that into the zoning relative to our last conversation. So the ground mounted tier 1 and 2 systems would be permitted through the issuance of a special use provided blah, 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 blah. It provides not in the scenic view shed overlay, essentially in the AR1, AR2, and RR3, right? So those are the small. Wait, did I say that right? Yeah.
Getting back to the original question,
Mhm.
what was the genesis of prohibiting energy storage systems?
The last
The visual,
ordinance committee, no, the last ordinance committee meeting. That was the general
Yeah, but that
consensus
wasn't
of the.
at the ordinance, maybe it was visual. That's what I remember.
okay.
Headline was the one that said, I don't like the look of it.
Shouldn't
I
like,
think there was
okay.
also some questions relative to safety.
Size,
and
safety.
Well, she talked about flammability
Well, they
and the,
do, they burn.
the storage
forever.
ones are going away from lithium.
If we do allow large scale battery storage, it needs its own ordinance, its own code.
It does.
It does.
Say that again, please, Sean.
If we were to adopt or allow large scale battery storage, we need to go through the same process and adopt regulations for it.
I would think it'd be part and
Yeah.
parcel, just like the wiring or the inverters, or, you know, it's a given when you have a solar farm that you may or may not have batteries or poles or transformers, or it's all part of the scheme or the design of it.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The way this is written would, in essence, prohibit large-scale solar farms in the town of Canada.
Yes, the tier 4, yes.
Just as a point of clarification, because if we're eliminating the solar farm, chances are we're not going to have much storage here in the town of Canandaigua. Battery storage.
No, I have no idea really how big is a 1 megawatt storage system? Really don't.
I don't either.
I have no clue what.
I don't know if it's one
I've
trailer or 10 trailers.
yeah, no
I'll
idea
find
what-
out, I will give more information about battery storage, so we can.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of those fellows.
I just did a quick Google search. It's like
Yeah.
one of those shipping containers.
Oh, yeah,
Is
but
one-
how much does that store? One of them?
What do you mean?
How
Is
much,
that 1 megawatt?
Yeah,
That's
this
storage
says,
container?
this says Megatron's 1 megawatt battery energy storage system is the ideal fit for an AC coupled with commercial
Okay.
applications.
so it's basically one Connex is 1
So it's like
megawatt.
like a 53 footer,
Mhm.
put it in the middle and you never see it.
So you could have, right, up to 1, but you couldn't have 2 of them
Mhm.
with this.
Two,
code.
one, what? Two,
1 megawatt.
You couldn't have 2 of those
Storage.
shipping containers. You could have 1 of them.
I think it's foolish.
Foolish to not allow?
Yeah.
Well,
You're gonna have solar system, you ought to have battery storage.
but we're not having solar systems.
Wait a minute.
Individuals are having battery storage.
No, no, we got tier
Tier
1, 2, and 3. We don't have any
Three.
say on the 4s.
But 3 is larger than a home system. What are these?
Are we allowing tier 3s?
Yes,
You know, what, I'm just rereading the
It's-
draft.
no,
I
I'm just
think there's
saying,
something
It's
missing
not
there.
clear in paragraph 8 where I'm out in tiers 1 and 2 or permitted in certain districts.
I thought at the last meeting, we said that we were only going to allow home or personal.
Right, so that's what, so tier 1 and 2 are essentially your home and your like personal stuff, right? So looking at the definition, so that's allowed in AR1, AR2, RR3, essentially, right? And then tier 3s are allowed in the commercial and the industrial zoning districts only through use of a special permit, use permit. right? So those are the ones that takes a little bit more. And then the definitions for tier 1 and 2, so just scroll into that.
Two is up to 8 acres. That's not small.
Tier 2, ground mounted solar energy systems larger than 25 kilowatts that primarily use the electricity grade from the system on site. Tier 2, ground mounted solar energy facilities have a nameplate capacity of up to 1 megawatt or facility area up to 8 acres, right?
18.
Right.
You know, we're not really using electricity on site.
Yeah, I've got
It's
some
being
questions on there.
generated, but it
That's
goes
all
out
going to the grid. Yeah,
My neighbor covered his horse barn with solar panels. And that power enters after the meter. He doesn't use that power his facility. He gets paid for any excess power above what he uses. After a year, he gets money coming back from RG&E. But
everybody's solar is that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not on-site use.
Is wrong.
You don't know where that electron, it could be coming
Absolutely.
from California. I mean, you just don't know.
If we only allow tier 3 in the CC and the I districts,
That's a significant change.
wow, they're small lots. I mean, you're not gonna get too many 8 to 40 acre lots
Right.
in those districts, so you're essentially precluding
So that helps.
any tier 3s.
So this
Essentially,
would kill the 2 projects that
yes, it
are,
would.
yeah, it basically,
But I think that's the intent. I think that's the direction the
Absolutely.
ordinance committee gave us.
So
it is.
if we could,
So essentially, we will not have any solar arrays less than 8 acres, or more than.
More than 8,
More than 8 acres. Yeah,
right?
maybe.
does that hurt farmers?
Well, wait, let's talk about the farmers. And we, we're gonna have perpetually the problem on what's the valuable farmland or whatever the def is.
Yep.
Everybody who isn't a farmer is in love with farming, and this is, okay? If we didn't have any farmers, we wouldn't have any blue-green algae. And farming as an economic business is probably profitable for 10 farms, if that, in the town of Canandaigua. If you didn't inherit the land, it'd be down to 5 or maybe 0. It's not a viable business in terms of scale or our land. And we have to recognize that the guy that owns that land might be a lot more prosperous having a solar farm there than a bunch of cows dumping their manure into the lake. We have to be cognizant, but forget about the romance of farmers, and it's a matter of economics. If I owned your land and it was, I might want to put a solar farm there, but now we've told it that it's in the sacred view shed. You've just lost the use of putting in a solar farm there, John. You're not going to graze sheep there, I don't think, but I think we ought to step away from this romance of farms and protecting farms and recognize that the property owners have rights, and a lot of this is taking away the rights of a property owner. Where we say, we want to, this last meeting that I watched on Zoom, we said, why do we permit solar farms at all? That's taking away the rights of somebody's property.
Didn't we do something similar with development of the farmlands also?
Is it right? I don't know. Yeah, we do.
We did.
Yeah. But to suggest that, as somebody did at the last meeting, why do we want solar at all in the town of
Well,
Canandaigua?
I raised that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, you know,
Doug, how does what we're talking about here relate to the strategic farmland initiative in terms of what you're trying to do with this? Does solar help or hinder what you're trying to do here?
It's generally speaking, no impact because it has to be done, I think, on a case by case basis, right? So you can't gobble up the large amounts of large cropland with solar, right? But we've had so many examples over the years, right? The guy, even though he never ended up constructing it, right? The guy that we permitted him to build the solar panels on the edges of the property and all the scrubland that he really wasn't using, right? To keep the to keep the horse pasture open at the corner of Andrews and North Road, right? There's any number of those different stories. The one that that guy that we talked to, the solar companies, here's the thing, these solar companies are so aggressive, very, very aggressive. And the guy that we talked to, like, he made it crystal clear. His only objective was just to put solar panels and line the crop fields. And that was what he was looking to do. His concern and interest had nothing to do with whether or not the land was currently being farmed or whether or not it was prime soils or not prime soils or strategic, right? So then we always get into this definition of prime soils. And I say this all the time. And just because the soil, it may not be 99% soil on the parcel. If it's a 50-acre parcel that's next to a 150-acre farm that's currently farmed, that is more valuable than the farmer having to pick up the plow and drive down the street 5 miles and reset the plows, right? But it all has to do with the willingness of the landowner to enter into agreement to farm that or not. But at the end of the day, the landowner always has the option of making a subdivision application. There is nothing in the strategic farmland protection area where we have told them that they can't do something. There's zero. They can always come in for a housing development application.
And what's the best use
Would you rather?
for me if I've got 100 acres out on Andrews Road and I getting sick of slapping the hogs or raising the horses or plowing the fields, and I get all this money from some guy that wants to lease my land, and I can sit back and live in, not Florida these days, but we are essentially depriving the property owner of the best use of his land.
Okay, but then what do
There's
you do
other
about the
options.
person
I
across
sell
the
it to
street?
a developer and it comes there.
And guess what?
So
You're
what
gonna
would you
have to
rather
get
have?
100
Solar,
homes there
solar
instead.
array or?
So we gotta rethink how we're
Let me
telling
just
people. how
expand
they
this
can use it.
conversation a little bit more, okay, just for conversation. What do we do about the scenic view shed?
That ship has sailed.
Okay, so
This law prohibits it.
then-
in the scenic
We have
So then
we
in
have
summary,
restricted.
what you're saying
Yeah.
is that outside of the view shed, we shouldn't be so restrictive.
Absolutely. And if I look at the figures, it's the last 4 comprehensive plans. We have an inventory of farmland, vacant land, and the farmland continually diminishes by 10-15% every 3 years. Farming is
Might not be as profitable here as it is
It's
in other
absolutely
locations.
not
in the country.
profitable. You sell it to a developer, or you bring in a solar farm, or you put a windmill up.
It's basic economics, right?
Absolutely,
So-
and we gotta recognize that for the property owner. I don't own any farmland.
Well, certainly, I would say I could be in concert with and in harmony with what you're saying if we kept solar farms from the strategic areas in the town.
And I got a feeling that somebody, you could say, wait a minute, my best use of my land is putting a solar farm.
Well, then you'd go for a variance, right?
Yeah.
And if I wasn't successful with the
You'd
variance,
be
then
furious.
I'd go and find alternative.
You'd
to fight it,
subdivide
right?
it and put 20 homes up there.
So, but yeah, I could be convinced and
Yeah.
I could be in harmony with what you're saying. If we keep
Well,
the solar farms out of the view sheds, except for personal use. And we wanted to put them up where the farmlands are, or a farmer decided to put them up there. It's his land. In my opinion, he should be able to do what he wants to do with it.
There are areas
That's
that
my
are
initial
outside.
point. We ought to be careful about this. Oh, I don't like boxcars in the view shed, or solar farms in the view shed, or,
You're in agreement with that we
Oh,
shouldn't
yeah.
have them in that area.
yeah,
I'm
I
comfortable
think
with what you're saying.
some of this is too restrictive, and I was concerned with the attitude that I saw at the last meeting.
There are areas that are not in that scenic view shed that are residential in nature, where there is flat cropland that's being used now right across the
Right
street from
next to
me,
you.
right
Yep.
next to me, and I
Yep.
do not want to see them there. How do
Well-
you prohibit that?
But if I was that landowner, I may say, Terry, God, it's got a wonderful southern exposure. And I'm sorry, you can buy my land, or I'm gonna put it up. I'd be furious.
Well, I know that you're concerned because you're in the scenic view shed, so you don't want to see anything like that there. I'm not in it. I don't want to see it either. So how do we get both of them on paper?
That's a tough one.
Yes.
See,
Well, that's
that's,
tough too,
you have
because
to take away the NIMBY attitude.
No, you can't take it away completely. Community character means something. You can't take that away. You know, that's
To
just not,
address your point, can that be done by zoning? By our definition of what areas?
yeah. Let's not put anything in AR2 area, which is what 60% of the town.
well, we have to
I mean,
remember our
that's-
open space and our scenic views master plan too, because it captures a lot of those areas that we're talking, that Terry's talking about, that are not maybe in the scenic view
Well,
shed
it's not just
overlay, but
across-
they're, yeah, it's not just views from the lake. It's, I mean, there's some beautiful views up,
Well, you can
you know,
go,
up north.
most of Middle Cheshire Road is
Middle Cheshire has,
not in that permanent protection area. House Road,
John?
anything south of 5 and 20 isn't in it.
Doug,
So,
or Greg, did you have
you know.
something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to add something I learned from the town of Victor in the last few months. You know, in this conversation about solar, and there are other conversations that can be had here also, but they always start out with a legislative intent. And I really like that discovery I've made of their work. And it addresses what is the community's intent, and the boards that would enforce that, or the boards that would enable that. And it's plain English language. And without that, you know, in this case, this solar stuff, I've been involved with it personally, as some of you know. It's a, if the communities are prepared for it, there's an general understanding of what will work and what won't work. And that's what the legislative intent spells out. And it's only a couple of paragraphs for every zoning article. But my point is that there's a way to do that. And it took me back to an activity within my professional career, was a prioritization of conflicting objectives. And there are conflicting objectives in everything we do, right? And there's a way to independently rank and review those. And you can do it through committee, you can do it through, everybody puts their pen to paper, and they tell you what their opinions are. And then it comes out with a more robust versus trying to pick line after line after line. If you got high level objectives articulated, and if people want to argue those, that's fine argument to have with people if they come in front of the boards. But you know, it's really important to have that understanding. So both for the developers, the landowners, as Tom has been suggesting, you know, it's a financial return the landowners are after, for sure. You know, one of the reasons I didn't sell the land, I leased the land to a solar firm out of Maryland on County Road 10. You know what the biggest driver of that was? I thought there'd be at least 20 more years until you put sewers in there, right? So, you know, what good is that land for development? And it's great for solar development, and the trees are mostly already cleared. And my point is that, but if you have an articulated legislative intent, And I would just ask you to think about that. I'm not telling you to do anything, just going to ask you to think about that as a way to help us collectively, the users, the regulators, the structure of the town itself, to manage these questions, because they're big questions, So, and the other thing I want to tell you is that farmers, I know a lot of farmers, a lot of huge farms. And on those farms, they're very proud people. But at the same time, they have to make a living too. And they can go a year or two because their costs are protected by insurance from the organization at the federal level. USDA protects their crops at a certain level. So there's just a lot of pieces at play here. And I think it's really important in this case, for sure, to describe that intent so then people can either rally around it or they can have a conversation with you before it comes out as a regulation. So that's all I want to say on that.
So one of the things I think we have to, so what I'm hearing here actually is a change to the existing code where we currently say the planning board is not permitted to grant approval for solar unless there's a finding that it's not a loss of viable agricultural land. I think collectively what I'm hearing here today is you want to open that up more, but I would also encourage you to review the vision statement from the comprehensive plan. And the basis for all of our laws and everything says the town of Canandaigua shall maintain its character and beauty through the protection enhancement of its natural, agricultural, rural, historic, and recreational resources. And, that is the basis. We are an agriculture community. Like it or not, we're an agriculture community, have been since 1789. And so much of what we do is a basis building on that agriculture community and finding that balance, right? And if you strike that section, I guarantee you we'll be losing farmland a lot faster than 3%.
Well, we have to differentiate between farmland and vacant land too. There's fewer and fewer acres that are farmed.
But again, in this scenario, the planning board has the sole discretion with all of the advice and all of the experts that they can possibly ever dream that they need to make that determination.
Yeah, got to have a lot of people looking at it.
Right, and so they take all of that information together. If it's not actively farmed, it's sitting there fallow and it's grown up into woods or whatever. Maybe it's not a loss of active farmland.
And that's a difficult definition.
But that's why
We got a lot of people looking.
But that's why we don't want to define it.
Yeah.
That's why we don't want it so black and white, because we want the planning board to be able to hear from the agriculture committee, hear from the ECB, hear from everybody. And that's why they're appointed to those offices to make those decisions.
I don't disagree with that, but it's a difficult choice. And it's a difficult choice for the guy that owns the land next to you or your land as to what the best economic use of property is. Or Greg, he could have put in a pig farm. You have to recognize the rights of the property owner.
Just as an aside, in Doug's AR report last week, he did have a page in here about county profile, Ontario County, New York. It was dated 2017. The county had 833 farms, and the percent change since 2012 was down 2%. You work down through the numbers, there's 200,000 acres and being farmed, the average size of the farm, 240 acres. You work down through the market value of the product sold, farm related income, farm expenses. The net cash farm income was $63,000. A whole lot of money, but that was up 23% from 2012. Some of that could be inflation, who knows, but
2012 is the most recent.
no, 2017.
Oh.
They were using 2012 as a base year and looking at 2017. So farm, they have a breakdown farms by value of sales. Out of that 833 farms, 235 farms, 28% of the farms had sales of less than $2,500. So that's over a quarter of the farms.
That's not real money.
Another quarter of the farms
That's not
had
even paying their
income
taxes.
of $100,000 or more, sales of $100,000 or more. So I mean, it's, most of the farms are,
$100,000, you're losing money.
that's only 226 out of the 833. So it's, the size of the farms is, most farms are less than 180 acres. 500, almost 600 of those 800 farms are 179 acres or smaller. It's an interesting comparison. I don't know where you found it.
I've never seen that, but I think it bears out.
Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, they do an
It's-
ag census.
There are very few
Well,
folks that would buy the land and go into farming.
I think a lot of these farms are not. This isn't the principal source of income, can't be.
No, they're
And if you're
hobby.
selling $2,500 a year and you're living on it, no. I mean, they're happy farms, as you say, Sean.
Mhm.
$100,000 or more, the 226 county, this is the entire county, not our town. $100,000 or more in sales, so very small fraction of those are significantly higher, so.
They'd
It's tough
all
to make.
love to have a solar farm on it.
They might.
Doug, would you take out the reference to the valuable agricultural land?
No,
Or is it someone I'm
it's
looking
down here, right here. It's valuable agricultural land.
Oh, okay, good. We'll look at it front. That's okay. Yep. So that's one control.
And that's going to the Ag Advisory Community.
And I guess under this draft, that's one control. Second control is having a battery system that's larger than 1 megawatt. And third would be, it couldn't be on a lot more than 8 acres. Essentially, that's what this draft will allow.
Correct.
Say that again, please, summary, Chuck.
Can't be on valuable agricultural land,
Can't be.
cannot be, as determined by the Ag Committee. And they do a
They do
very detailed
thorough.
analysis, and the planning board's relied on, and if they say no, or if they say yes, it's on valuable land. We said, sorry, but you know, we've got a reporter. So the other thing is, according to this draft, a battery, it'd have to be close to a energy source or a grid system that would be able to handle no more than a 1 megawatt battery. Okay, and thirdly, it could not be more than 8 acres. Correct? I mean,
Tier 3.
Tier 2 is it's got a maximum.
Has to be more than 8 acres, doesn't
No, we don't allow it.
No,
Not
that
under
wouldn't be,
this.
that's the max.
Then
it?
you're
Oh,
in
the
the tier,
max is 8 acres.
then you're in the
Okay.
tier 3, and we're not allowing tier 3s, which.
Well, we
Well,
are
that's-
allowing
that's the
them, but
tiers.
not on ag.
Tier 3s would be allowed in the CC and
CC.
industrial with a special use permit.
Okay, it really doesn't say that.
Yeah, I got to relook at that wording on that very first
So I was
paragraph.
wondering what
But
happened to tier 3.
so the memo, though, if you look at the memo, that actually spells out the summary of our conversation. So there's really, these are the main key points of the changes to this. So allows tier 1, 2, and 3 in the CCNI, meaning that tier 3, the only place it would be allowed is CCNI, right? It would allow tier 1 and 2 in the AR1, AR2, and RR3. Okay, and then tier 4 through incentive zoning, essentially, right? Then it would require, the next section there, requires a site plan that includes a 50-foot buffer, soil sampling, screening, noise level projections, line of sight analysis. Then adds the changes with the decommissioning plan. So that's really the gist of the changes there, you know, in a quick summary.
But the tiers 1 and 2 in the AR1, AR2, RR3, and then tier 4. Tier 3 isn't.
Yeah, that first paragraph, that's what I'm saying. I got to wordsmith that. There's something, I don't know if there was a version or a different version, but essentially the intent here, right? Based on our last conversation was that the tier 1 and 2 and 3 be allowed only, so essentially, let me say it the other way, so it's just easier. Tier 1 and 2 are allowed in the AR1, AR2, RR3. Tier 3 is allowed in CC and R.
Yeah.
So
Why wouldn't we do a tier 3 in the RR or the AR?
Because what they said is at the last ordinance committee meeting that they didn't want those larger systems in those agricultural areas and those rural areas. That was the direction from the last ordinance committee meeting.
Now, if we were to do that, it addresses Tom's point and concern, but flies in the face of what Terry's concerned with, right?
It's the exact opposite of what you guys told me to do at the last meeting.
I understand, but I mean, the conversation's progressing, right? We're having raising more issues because we got other people in the room and
Yeah, but then if you're gonna do that, then you gotta bring back the ag committee. You gotta bring back all these people that you've been listening to for a year that have told you not to do that.
right. Right. So now we have a conundrum, right?
So now we get back to the maximum in the AR and RR would be 8 acres.
If you went back, and unfortunately, I'm sure we don't have a study, but the number of farms, whatever they're farming, in the RR3, the gross more than 100 grand a year would be less than this many.
Tom, I'm actually just pulling up the agriculture enhancement plan and looking through that spells out a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and it doesn't jive with what you're saying. There's detailed in here in terms of the number of acres, in terms of the loss was actually slowed as a result. If you compare the agriculture enhancement plan to the 2020 comprehensive plan update, you can see a sizable decrease in the loss of farmland in the town of Canandaigua compared to years prior before there was those provisions in place.
Because we've got hobby farms, not because they're profitable.
Well, I'm saying regardless, the
That
data
would
is it
be
didn't
my
decrease.
argument. And again, the RR3 is the largest zoning district in the town. And I
AR
would.
two,
AR2 is the largest.
Okay.
not RR three.
And currently they're, well, based on this, 8% of the RR3 is active farmland. Nope, not much.
Mostly hills.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
1,236 acres is active farmland according to this in the RR3.
What's the land across
Boy,
from
that's
you?
not very
zone
much,
is,
is it?
you know?
AR two. We're AR two.
So,
RR three.
if only 1,000 acres of the RR3 is being farmed, there's a lot of opportunity.
West side.
There's a lot of woodland. There's a lot of
A
hills.
lot
There's a
of
steep
woods
slopes.
and so on, and a lot of hills that are facing south that might be the best use of solar. My point is,
But then
Why
you
shut
get
the
the
door?
steep slopes, right? Do you want, I mean, then you get the scenic view shed overlay. I mean, just look at these maps, you guys. So if you take the RR3, which is predominantly everything in purple, the scenic view shed overlay. All right, and then you have the steep slopes, which is the map next to it. Pretend that the two of those are overlaid, and then look at that southern part of the town of Canandaigua, which is the RR3. There's nothing there. I mean, very, very little. If you're going to prohibit solar in the scenic view shed overlay, then you've prohibited it in the RR3 by default, even if that code wasn't in there. Maybe you pick up those parcels on the bottom left corner of that map over there, very few number of parcels that would allow it, but very few.
Well, I don't think I could say strongly enough that it should absolutely not be allowed in the scenic view shed.
No, I think we all agree with it.
So really, the area that we're talking about, that Tom is talking about, particularly
I'm just.
would be the area on the north end of the city, or the town, excuse me.
Well,
Well, more than
so
that.
the light
That is
green,
where we got the more fertile land.
right? So the light green is AR2.
Okay.
And based on the agriculture enhancement plan, 77% of that is currently active agricultural farmland, 11,332 acres.
Now stop right there. Let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
Per this revised code, we are allowing,
No,
No.
not allowing large scale solar
Correct.
farms. That's AR2.
correct.
Tier 4.
AR1 is this light green. So
Now, let's talk about AR1. Are we allowing it in AR1?
no,
No.
No.
Mhm.
So
The
we're not
only-
allowing it in a view shed per this code. and We're not allowing it in AR1 or AR2.
or R3, which is this gray area, right?
So the only place it would be allowed is the 332 border.
No. It would only be
Commercial.
allowed in this yellow area,
Yes.
this yellow area, and then the CC, which would be this blue area over here where the ones are on County Road 10. You wouldn't be able to put it here. So it would essentially be this spot, this spot, this spot. It'd be very, very small area where you'd be allowing tier 3s based on this code.
1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 or 2s you could
Large-
put
large
anywhere,
scales,
but
1, 2, or 3.
well, no.
C and I is 1, 2. and 3.
No. So, right, so tier 3, let's just talk about tier 3. So the only place you could, so you wouldn't be able to locate a tier 4
It's
anywhere.
Commercial and industrial.
No, tier 4 nowhere. Tier 3, the only place is these yellow areas in this blue area, right? Tier 1 and 2, you could put pretty much anywhere.
Up to 8 acres
Mhm.
in non-valuable ag land.
Right, that part stays in.
Okay, so non-valuable ag land, no more than 8 acres. Can't have a battery pack of more than 1 megawatt.
Well, that's open for discussion.
And, well, that's
Yeah.
the way the draft is.
Yeah.
And would be subject to our tax
Yes.
assessment.
And the ag committee
Mhm.
is in harmony with the way this is written now.
Yes,
They don't want development in the ag.
they don't want the
farmland.
solar, right? Because it takes away the cropland. It
Yeah.
takes away the.
Yeah.
Now, but on a case by case basis, and Travis Woolley's parcel is the classic example of that down here, right? Where they looked at it. The soils weren't that great. There was erosion going on. And their recommendation actually in that particular sense, in that circumstance was, yes, put a solar farm there.
So
And that could be the
Let's talk
case
about-
for many of those farmers.
let's talk about that process for a minute, okay? So someone comes in and wants to put a solar farm in the green, light green areas.
Mhm.
If we adopt this as written,
Mhm.
planning board has to deny it because of our town ordinance.
Well, the planning board would,
That's
they would
what-
never,
They
so
would
somebody
never
would
even
make
get
an
there.
application, determination would get done that it's been denied.
Okay.
And so then they have that denial, that's an instant thing. They would have that denial
And then it would.
And
go to
they could-
ZBA
if they
If
met
they chose to.
for an area variance application. Actually, no, that'd
No,
be a use,
that's gonna be a use variance.
that would be a use variance. That would be nearly impossible for them
That's-
to get.
That'd be
That's-
rough.
Because they would have to prove there's no financial alternative for the property.
That's a no-go.
Well, it would go in front of PRC. PRC would distribute to the ag committee. The ag committee will make a determination if it's valuable soils. If they come back to the
Wait, it
planning,
wouldn't even get that far, Chuck, because it's
can't
just
get
an
that.
application. So the determination would be a denial.
If it was large,
well, if it fit the other criteria. I mean,
yeah, but if it's not in the zone, if it's not allowed per the zone, we wouldn't even.
Per
it
this
wouldn't get
law,
there.
right? If it's a tier 3 in the AR2,
I'm
it's
saying
gonna
what
go.
we do now.
Oh,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, what
yeah.
we do now, and it goes to the ag committee, and then if it comes back to
Right.
us and the ag committee is determined that it is valuable soil, then we deny it. Now,
Okay,
then
so
it's-
let's go to that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
The way the current ordinance is written,
Mhm.
explain where we're at now with that.
So exactly what you just said, right? So you can make application. There's no prohibition specific to the specific zoning codes or the scenic view shed overlay. So you could, pick anywhere, pick SCR1. So somebody makes an application to put a 50-acre solar farm in, they would make application. It would go to, the application would get a zoning law determination. It would then get referred to PRC. It would go through its process. The ag committee could weigh in and say, yeah, yes, it is, or no, it's not. Actively agriculture farm land, whether or not it's valuable. Planning board ultimately makes that determination. The ECB provides comments. The agriculture and the ECB are both advisory boards. So based on their experience, their training, their knowledge, their real life expertise, they're providing those inputs, and the planning board is then making a decision. But it could absolutely be permitted, yes.
And what's the harm of that existing that way and having all the safeguards of the number of people, committees that look at it?
So I was gonna ask the question a little differently, but I'm on the same page.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what
Case
now
by
is
case
motivating
basis.
us to do this ordinance and change it from what currently exists?
Well, that goes back to Bob's
Bob's.
findings.
Well,
for the-
because we had, yeah, if Bob and Gary Humes had sort of looked at this things that we haven't really looked at the solar ordinance in 5-6 years. And things have evolved as far as technology and all that, and maybe we should go back and look at it. I think the tier systems have been set up subsequent to our initial.
Yes.
That is correct.
Is that
So
correct?
I think we looked at it as, okay, now's the time to sort of massage the whole ordinance and make any changes that we feel would be for the betterment of the town. And it included a lot of the decommissioning things that we didn't even talk about today, but Bob came up with. And then we got into this whole issue about what zoning districts are we gonna allow, and applying the tier system hierarchy to the districts. So that's.
The tier system thing would open the door really that, when you pull that in, because when the original solar law, you won't find that tier system.
No, let's hear it's not. there.
No, you didn't have it.
So introducing that, how does that affect what we had? This is the result.
Well, and the other thing that this has in it that was an incorporation of what Bob's stuff was, plus the existing code, is the requirements for the site plan. So there's some of that stuff that's missing currently that relative to whether or not it's being provided. Some of that, though, is like discretionary, though. You guys are gonna make a decision. Our last conversation, we talked about noise levels. And so I included noise level projections, including decibel level points, so some of that is absolutely discretionary.
Well, and the soil sampling, I think that became an issue to make sure it's a pre and post decommissioning, that, you have the same type of soil post that you had pre, and in the decommissioning or the cost estimate, you make sure you allow for inflation and doing an analysis every 5 years to make sure you're staying up with the cost of decommissioning. So,
But that didn't change, though.
well,
That's in
I-
there.
Yeah, I noticed that, and that was Bob's really only comment, because I sent the draft to Bob,
Mhm.
and he said, do we want to include that? And we haven't gotten that far in discussions.
Right. Yeah, no, we need to talk about that, but there is a thing in there already about inflation, right? So we've got to talk about that. This is definitely more than a one meeting. It's a-
So let me just, I'm sorry, Terry. you want something?
Well, on that decommissioning and the updating it by every 5 years,
Yeah.
it doesn't really say there's a bond posted.
Yeah, it does
Yeah,
later.
someplace, yeah.
There's some,
It does, but we talked about updating that as well and looking at it.
what is the state of sureties?
What would you like to know?
How
That-
so?
That if you got a 20 or a 30-year lifespan of these things and you take out a surety for the anticipated decommissioning, you don't, first of all, don't know the salvage value of this crap in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. You don't know the labor costs are going to be. How do we adjust, or how does the industry adjust the surety dollar amount?
The planning
To-
board needs to do it up
to-
front. That's
how-
where
that-
it has to. include
Is
the
there a
inflation.
mechanism for that? Are the surety companies have an inflation factor built in?
No, they won't
They
change the
don't.
surety. Once the surety's been issued, that will not change. That's why the planning board has to do that.
Wait,
up front.
there's a dollar amount attached to it.
Right, and that will not
It's going to
change.
be inadequate then.
That's why the planning board
Right.
needs to do that
Tom,
up
if you don't
front.
mind, that's kind of talking about the details within it.
We're getting into the weeds.
You're getting into the weeds a little bit, and I like a lot of the things that are written in there as far as, you know, the testing of the soils and the surety and all those things and, but
How do
that's
we
kind
guarantee you when the outfit's gone bankrupt?
yeah. We gotta talk about that,
Yeah.
but the issue here seems to me to be, say that again,
Where do we want it?
where do we want it?
Yep.
And it sounds to me now, is there a compromise between where we currently are and where this thing goes? Someplace in the middle, and maybe, I just throw this out for conversation and discussion and ideas, okay? Can we leave where we're at now so that the advisory boards take a look at it case by case basis and the planning board makes a final decision? And we incorporate all the details of what we have in here into the existing ordinance?
Yeah,
Does that address your
I-
concern?
I-
and Does that address your
well,
concern? Terry?
again, I'm concerned with the fairness and let the applicant make the case for putting it here, for there.
I
And we've
understand
got
your point.
plenty of gatekeepers here.
Yeah.
And an ag advisory committee and the economics of it and where the
Yeah.
substations are.
And I also understand Terry's sensitivity to the issue, and
Yeah.
my concern also is sensitivity to the exact location of where these things would be going. So
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
middle of the road kind of place,
Yeah, well, I mean, this paragraph here, I mean, if we do that,
Paragraph you're pointing to.
that's 22062.2A.
The memo. Is
That's
that what
the
you're
memo
looking at?
he
Yeah,
is.
he's looking at the memo, the tier 1, 2, and 3, but you're saying allow it in the
That
CC,
would
the
be-
I, the AR1, the AR2, and the RR3 through a special use permit.
So we're not changing where it's allowed as it currently.
But-
stands.
Well, I gotta update the draft,
Well,
but
yeah, but
essentially
still.
it would AR1, AR2. So it would, so let's just hypothetically talk about that for a quick second. So you'd be allowing tier 1, 2, and 3 in the CC, the industrial, the AR1, AR2, RR3. That means you would not be allowing it in like the SCR1 area, which you could actually make an argument sometimes, you know, some of
most
those
of that's
could go.
view shed
I
anyway.
don't think it is now.
No, that's not
SCR
the view shed. SCR isn't.
Yeah. you're right.
Well,
Yeah.
parts of it is, but parts of it's
Some
not,
of it.
right? You would, so that's the majority of it, right? That would be the only other big chunk I would see.
No, what I said was this paragraph here.
You want to
That says
prohibit,
tier 1 and 2 and AR1, AR2, RR3.
right?
That's
So you
what
want
the
to keep
paragraph
it
says.
where, you want to keep it so that tier 3 is not allowed in the AR2. Right.
Because that, I mean, that takes it up to 8 acres,
Mhm.
Mhm.
tier 2.
Yes.
And no greater.
I don't think it should be in the SCR one either.
Is it? Maybe Bob took it out.
I mean, most of that
I know
is,
it was allowed in the SCR before, was it? Is the original?
No, I mean, we'll have to
I need
prohibit
to,
it, obviously.
it's
We'll have to
gotta
look
be.
at that. This is-
which would eliminate my opportunity to put a solar farm.
You're screwed anyway.
So-
You're right, I am. If you're in the view shed.
We've got the view shed.
But again, I would leave it up to the applicant to make a case, and we've got plenty of gatekeepers.
I know, it's just you guys aren't saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So tier 2, figure 8 acres. So let's just talk about tier 3 for a second, because I think that's really where a lot of this conversation is. Tier 3 is 8 acres to 40 acres. So you're saying allow that almost townwide, with the exception of the scenic view shed overlay.
I can understand the SCR and the
Right.
RRs.
Right, but the rest of
Or
it, you're saying
yeah.
allow 40-acre solar farm to go anywhere.
It's non-diverse.
And obviously, you're saying no, that not to allow that 40-acre solar farm. So then and obviously the town board's gonna have to decide this, but are you okay with a 40-acre solar farm being plopped down here wherever?
Well,
Absolutely.
the
If-
non-valuables.
If they made a case for it, the best use is a solar farm.
Best use in what sense?
If I'm the
Dollars.
landowner and that's where I can
Dollars.
maximize my
Just
income.
dollars,
Yeah.
that's what you're saying,
Yeah.
just money.
And
not what it does to the
otherwise
character
you've
of the
deprived,
neighborhood or
you've
anything like that.
taken away what,
John, perhaps, I mean, I don't think you guys are gonna come to consensus. Perhaps, perhaps what we want to do is instead of focusing on that, we have the draft, right? Even though the draft needs to be massaged, maybe we look at the rest of it and advance it to the town board for the town board to give some direction. Because you guys are clearly split.
well,
I wanna make one comment here also, please, that
Go ahead.
currently we are leasing from farmers in the state of New York, and the average annual payment is $400 to $500 per acre. So if you take 1,000-acre parcel, there's a number of them in the town of Canandaigua, there'd be $500,000 in the farmer's pocket to give up farming every year. So when Tom says, well, the best prove to us that it's the best financial, I can prove that all day long. I'm just letting you guys know that, right? So the question is, would the farmer rather work his tail off and make $100,000 in the risk of weather and other things he doesn't control, or take the $500,000 a year? And that's what the reality is, right? So we've got to make sure we understand when we say that we give them the benefit of the doubt to show what is the easiest way to get the most profit for the farmer. It's clearly solar. Okay, so some farmers are against it still.
That's where the town board's got it, right? That's where the town board's got to make a decision because that doesn't fly with the comprehensive
No.
plan, so.
And since there aren't any 1,000-acre farms, is what you said in the beginning, it's a moot point here, Greg.
No, I said there are. There are 1,000-acre aggregated farms.
let's say is, for sake argument, it's 200 acres. And guy's a big farmer, or he wants to put in a solar farm. It's, you know.
Well, he uses-
Can you tell the guy not to have the pig farm, by the way?
The challenge I see, Doug, is if we send this to the town board, it doesn't facilitate a conversation such as the one we're having here, where it's just an open and free conversation, and everybody gets to express their opinions, and then you can have some dialogue back and forth. I mean, is there a way, I'm just brainstorming now, is there a way we can invite the town board to an ordinance committee meeting and have this free and open discussion with them in attendance?
Well, you could always invite them, and obviously you have two
Yeah.
sitting current town board members on the ordinance committee. One of them just happens to not be here today,
Yeah.
but you know, the town board, though, always has the option of having that debate and dialogue relative to anything that's before them. So they can have that conversation with each other
Amongst themselves.
And I think that's what, you know, I think you kind of need to know where they are. You know, but it would do the same thing inviting them to come here, right?
Yeah, it just that they get some open dialogue from other members of the community that might be
But you,
restricted at a town board meeting to a 3-minute dialogue.
and maybe you want to schedule a special meeting, because then maybe you want to invite the agriculture committee and the ECB and everybody else to get all opinions in the room together.
And then it
I mean,
becomes,
right.
maybe become untenable. Yeah.
Right.
I would say it's better to have some kind of a semi-consensus
Yeah,
with our group, our ordinance committee,
yeah.
then throw it to the town board to chew up and decide how they feel about it.
The challenge is, I don't know if we're ever going to come to a consensus on this in this room.
Okay, Tom's gonna wind up agreeing with me. So.
No, I fully embrace and understand your concern.
And I
But
share Terry's concern in terms of
Absolutely.
the character of the community. you know?
I just think that we have to be mindful of when we're cutting out everybody in the RR3 or the, what the hell's the green one over there? You're shutting the door where there may be opportunities for the property owner, the green there, yeah.
And I am comfortable with kind of this concept
Because we've got gatekeepers.
where it goes to the planning board
Absolutely.
and a planning board can review it and make a decision based on the suitableness of the soils and the suitableness of where it fits in the community and
And the
those types of
and the
things.
economics. And ultimately, whether you believe we've got climate change or not, we've got to wean ourselves off of some of these fossil fuels.
Mhm.
But again,
And this is,
even the draft language would allow you to still have an 8-acre solar farm anywhere in the green. Can you have a 40-acre? No.
Greg, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Go ahead.
How large is the solar farm that you have leased the land to?
We have 9 acres and 9.2 acres or something like that. And the city has about, I don't know what they have, Doug, you may know, maybe 30 acres. for-
I think it's just short of 10.
Yeah, it's 10-ish.
You mean the old
Approximately.
landfill?
The old landfill, right, for the city,
So,
they occupied that.
The solar farm Greg's involved with
Mhm.
is borderline fitting in within this conversation that we're currently
Yeah, it's
having
a
with this
draft.
ordinance.
Yes.
He's in the industrial zone. Isn't he?
We also, for full clarity, you know, we went to work on the airport.
Hang on. This
And
was-
lo and behold, the airport was in agreement until they found out what the assessment would be on the land. And it got into a really, so they had to buy a certain amount of land to chop Brickyard Road in half, or one of the roads out there, I can't remember which one. And it wasn't Brickyard, it was another road, Thomas Road, I think. And so the feds paid for that, and therefore you had a really strict criteria to meet, that you had to get a return on that asset significantly advanced beyond where the company I was working with would go. And so they were in favor of it. It was a mixed bag. There's a couple guys who were against it, but majority of the guys and gals were for it. But it's just every situation is unique. That's what makes this problem especially difficult, because no property is like another property. You can come up with stories around every property themselves, and they may have restrictions that we can't even see,
The airport parcel would be allowed because it's industrial based on the draft language. I did just map out these two here. The city parcel, the city solar actual footprint is 9.6 acres. Greg's parcel, while it's 9 acres altogether, it's actually 6.6 acres is the footprint of the solar.
And the new one on County Route 10 that Dave Plant was involved with is.
That's not
10, right?
That's
It's
not
9.
mapped yet here. Let me-
Yeah,
I was gonna
that's
look up
9,
Travis.
it's
Willis here real quick.
9.9, maybe
Or
9, almost
more than 10
10.
acres.
Mhm.
So again, what
Those are roughly tier 2.
those are all tier
They
2,
are.
and those would be allowed through a special use permit in the AR1, AR2,
Tier
R3.
3 is the one that.
It's those bigger ones, right?
What's the output of the one that you have there, Greg, that you're leasing the land? Is that 2 megawatt or?
Yeah, I don't want to quote it anymore, but I think it's close to a megawatt, yes.
Oh, okay.
The advantage we had there, we were right upon the transformer.
Yeah.
And they had a line load problem at the city location, so that's why they came to us.
It's a substation.
Yeah.
No need-
Substation there, right?
Tom, your thoughts?
What's
trying
that?
to make decisions today on technology that involve both in the efficiency of
Well,
the
batteries,
efficiency of the
panels.
panels, the efficiency of the batteries, and the demands. The state of New York is making everybody wean off of fossil fuels. There's going to be more demand for electricity, and the attractiveness of bigger parcels is going to probably increase, I think. And we all got used to looking at utility lines. And someday solar farms may look attractive to us.
And that was really the impetus behind Bob and Gary's,
Yeah.
initiative on this. thing.
There's going to be more of them,
They
no
saw
matter what.
proliferation of- And the other thing we haven't mentioned, and I know we were all talking about today, is how does the town benefit financially, or how does its residents benefit from having solar farms in our town? And
Don't.
I mean, we don't. I mean, we ask that question every time somebody comes, and we really get a wishy-washy
Community
answer.
solar, remember that?
Yeah, I remember community
Where
solar.
the hell is it?
Well, you get
Well, that's coming,
CCA.
that's not-
CCA is.
That's
CCA
Yeah.
solar.
But
The
not
CCA
community
wasn't
solar.
around back in those days, but, again, how's the town benefit, or how's the residents benefit in reduction?
The one that I see, so Travis Wooley's looks like it's the largest of the three that are in existence today at 10.2 acres. Interestingly enough, and I know that was brought up, I think Adeline brought it up, right? I don't think his would be permitted today because it's in the scenic view shed overlay and it's visible from the lake. So I don't think, he'd have to try to get a variance, which I think would be nearly impossible. Maybe he could get a use variance on that because of the soils being so erodible and not good soils, and he could make a claim that it's not financially viable and that solar is maybe.
I know, you have to look at
That
every
would be,
possible
yeah,
use.
you'd
You
have
could
to use it. It would be,
Turn it into
it would be a
residential,
challenge.
commercial. Yeah.
But all of the other two would still be able to get a special use permit townwide as a tier 2, essentially.
Wow.
No, this is.
So it's not saying that they can't do it.
He's got a
Well, that
hairline
steep
brush.
slope area really cuts out a lot of the,
It does.
Mhm.
just setting aside the scenic view shed, the steep slope.
Right.
You're not gonna put these things on a steep slope. Those steep slopes are probably shading
Right.
areas that
Mhm,
aren't steep, so
Right. Yeah.
that very little area
Well,
down there. that-
Travis's was ideal. I mean, it's almost dead nuts south.
Yeah, but Tom, I can tell you and Adeline's not here, and I don't want to quote her, but that was probably the one she objected to the most, saying that she heard the most complaints about that, and that you could see it from the lake and everything else. So she felt that one was not ideal, and that one should not have been permitted.
Who owns the view shed?
Right,
I mean, I like the looks of your house
Right.
or the color of your
Right.
car. I mean, come on.
Here's Travis's property.
so it's borderline, it's right on the edge, it looks like.
It's just above it.
Yeah.
The argument we heard was mostly from the people who lived there, that it was blocking their view of the lake.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, it was,
It wasn't people looking.
it was,
Mhm.
the guys like Terry that don't want it next to them.
That's right, NIMBY.
Well, that's what we all are.
But again, are you comfortable with, let's say, the size of the one on County Road 10 or the one at the Old City landfill? Are you comfortable with that size being townwide? So that would be tier 2. So they could still do that,
10
right?
acres is a little
Right.
over the tier 2.
Travis is 10, the others are just.
In
below
my neighborhood, I am not comfortable with it, but I'm willing to say yes, I will.
for that. And then obviously the other provisions are still in place where the planning board has to make that decision and they get all the input and everything, obviously, from everybody. But again, it's the larger. Think about 4 times the size of that. Are you okay with that?
No.
Okay, so that goes back to our, right, so
So we're back
that
to
means
the
you don't
beginning.
want tier 3 in the light green or the dark
And
green.
maybe that's, and Bob had taken the AR2 out
He
of the
did.
original. So maybe the AR2 is the only one that's really restricted, and the RR1 and the AR1 do allow tier 3.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you, the AR?
Well,
is
it'd be
so
a
small.
compromise between turning everything loose to tier 3 versus controlling the AR2, the pale green area. And that would be in more conformance with your strategic farmland.
Well, the AR1's in it too.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I mean, it's mostly AR2, isn't it?
Yeah, mostly,
Yes.
but I mean, I don't know why we would distinguish. I mean, even all the base zoning stuff is, all the permittable, when you look up AR2, it says the same uses as an AR.
Well, the RR3 or the RR1 would still be subject to the scenic view shed and the steep slopes restrictions.
Right. So you're saying allow a 40-acre farm down here,
Possibly.
4 times the size of Travis Wooley's. That's pretty
I
big.
don't think between those two maps up there, I don't think there is anything.
Maybe.
maybe down in this area.
That could be, and that's gateway
In this
property.
Over in that corner, that southwest, just about
Down in this.
2 inches there maybe, but.
They,
I was just trying
They
to come
still
with
have to
a
go
compromise
before-
here, that's all.
the planning board?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's tough to get.
Oh, yeah.
Special use regardless.
You have to, they have to meet the valuable soil test.
So that would, so the current draft says that tier 3 can only obviously again go in the industrial up by the airport. Over off of County Road 10. Essentially, it would be the only place where you could put in that 40 acre, and it would still have to go to the first planning board.
Any
So
40
we're
acre
not
lots.
denying it completely.
No, you're not
No.
denying it at
Not at
all.
all.
You just
Well,
focusing.
there's
it.
no
It's called
40 acre
compromise.
lots. There's no 40 acre lots.
Well, there is up by the airport.
Yeah.
You could put it up there in that industrial zone
airport.
areas. I mean, even Pactiv could put, 40 acre solar farm there on their property if they wanted, that's all. I've actually talked to them about solar, but they said it's not financially viable for what they need.
How big's your lot?
Now it's huge. They have
Giant.
hundreds of acres.
How about the roof?
It's not, so I talked to them about that. They've looked at it. It says not financially viable.
Well,
We'll
Summarize
see
for us,
more
Doug.
and more of these as the costs go down and the efficiencies go up.
Well, this isn't a closed book either. Tim.
Yeah,
Right, correct.
Right, I mean, we can come back and revisit this in 10 years when things are more advanced, or 5 years, whatever the number is, right?
In 3 years, if it's
Efficiency.
double, that's the dilemma
Yeah.
with
Summarize
projecting
for
the
us
technology.
where we are,
So
where you think we are.
yeah, so and also keep in mind where I think we are is, and to Tom's point, technology is changing. I think with Uptown, I think we're gonna see solar roofs and solar sides. And this law does nothing to prohibit that. You can still embrace that. You can still have that, right? This is only the ground mounted systems. So where I think.
And let me just add,
Yeah.
to the future,
Mhm.
I believe solar farms are gonna become much more efficient, and they're gonna be able to produce a lot
Be
more
smaller.
electricity with a
Right.
lot smaller farms.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
So, you know,
cheaper
right.
cost.
right. So
summarize. please.
I don't think you're actually very far off from where you were at the last meeting, to be honest, where I think you're at. So tier 1 and 2 would be allowed town-wide almost, but excluding the scenic view shed overlay and the steep slopes area, obviously, with a special use permit from the planning board, provided all the provisions associated with that. Tier 3, again, allowed in the industrial commercial area. I mean, you guys raised the question about whether or not you allow tier 3 in the RR3, but again, think about it in terms of practicality. Think about the 3 solar farms that we have right now. It's 4 times the size of that is what the tier 3 is, whether or not you want to allow that down here. So I think that's really where you're at. There's still some other stuff, the application process and all that stuff. We'll go through all that stuff at some point in the future, but it really comes back to how big of a facility. And again, you're still allowing these 8 acre facilities. What's the 2 applications? Do you know what the size they are?
I want to say 15 and maybe 10. Yeah,
Yeah, they were
So
big.
They're
both
bigger.
Tier 3.
yeah, they're.
So they're
both-
both double the size of anything we have currently.
They're big.
Yeah.
Where do they wanna go?
County Road 30
And then up here.
and up
Michigan.
on, New Michigan at the town line. One might even be 20 acres.
So those are very large.
Tom, does this address your concerns? What Doug just summarized?
I would like this. I would be most in favor of allowing tier 3 again with the
Planning board?
So
with
the
the
soil
planning board and
constraints
the
and
ag in the green and the gray, or the light green and the gray. I'm thinking, I know there's a parcel in there that's probably 260 acres. That's a friend of mine inherited from his mother. There'd be a lovely big solar farm. Give them the
Nothing lovely about
opportunity.
Any solar farm.
Right.
There's nothing lovely about any solar farm. Ugly as sin.
You actually
You
probably
just in the eye
wouldn't
of the
even
beholder.
see it, probably wouldn't see it from the road. You know the parcel I'm talking about off of Bristol Road there, Doug? Fletcher Farm,
Mm,
it's right near your nose.
Yeah, I know where you're talking about.
Hasn't been farmed in 20 years, 30 years.
I think
That might be the best use for that.
I can't agree to the AR2. I could see the R1 maybe. I think the AR2 should be restricted to 8 acres unless and all the other conditions that you impose. But,
I will go with the consensus. I'm not gonna be a holdout.
The
I do. think
AR1
we-
is
We
the
have to recognize property rights and the
Yeah.
best use of your property.
Take the AR1 out too. Just leave the R1 in.
I know that underlying all this time, we agree on nuclear is the future.
I absolutely do. And I've been following some of those modular ones. There's a great one out in Wyoming.
These things are
It's,
just not
it's
it.
Terry, are you comfortable with
Yep.
Doug Summer?
some kind of sodium cooler. Are you familiar with
Are we
that?
saying tier 3 in this area or not? I'm unclear on
You
that.
can't boil
I
it.
kind of feel like we've gone back and
Let's
forth.
get everyone's opinion on that.
One
Terry, how do you
question.
feel?
What's that?
Tier 3 in the RR3. Yes or no? 40 acres in the RR3, yes or no? No.
No,
Yes.
Yes, because I believe in the gatekeepers.
They can be beaten up, you know that.
Split vote.
Adelaide's not here, but I can
No,
guess
they-
which way she
I
goes
was
on
gonna
that.
tell.
So
I
Doug's gonna
I
vote for
respect
her.
the
I'm not gonna vote for her,
process.
but I'm gonna guess.
so do you mind,
Yeah.
where do we go from here then? as
So
far as-
let me, because I need to wordsmith that first paragraph anyway. Let me wordsmith that a little bit and then we'll have to,
Come back and
we
discuss.
have to discuss it again.
I agree.
And-
So that'll be on the agenda for the next meeting. And just if we could indulge me for one more minute, and just talk about prioritization. Future topics. I think Shauna put this together for us.
Kim did this in this form. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, so we talked about the blue line setbacks. We had high on that, but we got a resolution to what we're gonna do. Not a resolution, but we have a direction as far as what we're gonna do with that. What would be the next higher priority issue?
Is the short-term rental?
We didn't get to
crisis?
talk, we didn't get to talk about that.
It's not a crisis, but it is something that needs to get fixed because
For next summer.
It seemed like there were two properties that were really involved with discussing it.
well, the issue is that there's a gray area in between. I was talking with Jared on Friday about, he's got some concerns also. I don't know if it's something that the town board ends up tackling or not directly, but you've got an area right now where you have some properties that they don't qualify for either. And then there's the underlying issue of, do you allow hosted or unhosted short-term rentals in the town of Canandaigua? And what we've kind of generally said is hands-off approach, right?
Yes.
That we're going to allow unhosted parties or unhosted short-term rentals, I should say, in the town of Canandaigua. And I mean, that's definitely possible. There's some problems because of differences between town code and New York State residential code that I was trying to spell out in there. So those are gonna have to get fixed, but
So what do you
It's-
believe is the next higher priority item on this list?
Short-term
just-
You
rental.
mean
Short-term
after short
rentals.
term? Yeah, I think
Is
short
short-term
term
rentals
should
the
be.
higher priority item?
I think so.
All
Yeah.
right, so we'll talk about the solar, try to wrap that up, and if we have time, we'll talk about short-term rentals.
Okay.
At our next future meeting.
On the 7th, 11/7.
That's our next meeting. Good,
Yeah.
comfortable? Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
It's good discussion. everybody.
That was really, I think it was very productive.